My name is Irma Caldwell. I'm 35 years old. And this is the story of how my husband took his ex on our family vacation, unaware that the very roof over his smug little head was mine. It started with a dream. Not the kind with castles or fairy tale endings, but the kind born of desperation, a dream to keep a family from falling apart. I'd planned everything for this trip. Every detail. Every phone call. Every reservation. I packed for the kids, coordinated time off from work, even mapped out rest stops for snacks and bathroom breaks. Damon, my husband of 12 years, hadn't lifted a finger. But I didn't complain. I told myself this was my gift to the family. We arrived at the West Palm Shores Resort on a humid Thursday afternoon, the kind of Florida heat that clings to your skin and slows your thoughts. The marble lobby was cool and elegant, with the scent of lemongrass candles wafting under soft jazz playing in the background. I was rolling our 3 kids' bags toward the check-in desk when Damon strolled past me with a smirk, his sunglasses still on indoors like he was someone worth staring at. I booked 3 rooms, he said without looking at me. My hands paused on the stroller handle. 3? I asked. What do you mean? 1 for me, 1 for Ivy, and 1 for the kids, he replied, pulling out his wallet and handing his card to the receptionist as if it were just another normal day. Ivy. His ex. The woman I had once forgiven him for texting late at night under the guise of closure. The same woman who once told me I was too tired looking to keep Damon satisfied. That Ivy. My lips parted, but no sound came out. Just trembling breath. Then I saw her. She walked out of the gift shop like she was modeling for a beachside magazine. Blonde curls perfect, a white sundress swaying around tanned legs, and a smug smile that widened when she caught my stare. Babe, she purred, her voice like syrup, did you tell Irma yet, or should I just go ahead and break the news? My stomach turned, but I stood still, grounded by the weight of my kids' expectant eyes. Aiden, my oldest, clenched his jaw. Noah and Ellie looked confused, their little hands holding onto my sleeves as if they sensed something wasn't right. Damon laughed, signing the registration form with a flick of his wrist. Don't worry, kids. Your mom's good at figuring things out. Right, Irma? Ivy reached into her purse and held out her handbag to me like I was hotel staff. Room 602. Be a darling and take this up for me while you're heading up. I looked at her hand. That smug, manicured hand offering me a purse like I was the help. I didn't move. Not because I didn't want to, but because everything in me told me to wait. To observe. To plan. Because this wasn't just about humiliation anymore. This was war. That night was supposed to be special. I'd reserved an ocean view table at Soleil, the resort's finest restaurant. Candlelit, coastal breeze, the kind of place where memories were supposed to be made. I imagined us reconnecting, maybe laughing like we used to. Instead, Ivy showed up in a red silk dress and took my seat beside Damon. I was pushed to the far end of the table like a forgotten cousin. I watched Damon rub her thigh under the table while Ellie played with her napkin and Aiden stared daggers into his untouched glass of water. To an unforgettable vacation, Damon said, raising his wine glass. And to Irma, who always brings all the extra baggage. I blinked. Then slowly, deliberately, set my glass down. I didn't say a word. I didn't even look at Ivy as she giggled like she'd just scored a victory. I folded my napkin and placed it on the table, kissed each child on the head, and stood. Damon glanced up. Irma, he said. You're not going to make a scene, are you? No, I replied quietly. I don't need to. And I walked away. Not to cry. Not to collapse. But to rise. Because what Damon didn't know was that I had booked a separate room. Room 827. In my own name. Paid from my own account. A precaution I made after finding one too many late-night business trip receipts that didn't match the stories. That night, I unlocked the door, sank into the leather chair on the balcony, and stared at the sea. I didn't cry. I opened my laptop. First, I logged into our joint bank account. Damon always boasted about being the breadwinner, the financial genius. But the truth? I managed every account. Paid every tax. Maintained every investment. The only reason he had money to throw around was because I made sure it was there. By midnight, I had transferred every liquid fund into my personal holdings. $58,000 in mutuals. $12,000 in emergency cash accounts. Gone from ours to mine. Then I opened the file for the Colorado vacation home. It was a sore point in our marriage. Damon told everyone he'd bought it with crypto profits. The truth? My late uncle had left me an inheritance I never told him about. I used it to buy the house in full, under my maiden name. Legally, Damon had no rights to it. With a few clicks, I restricted all access to secondary parties and filed the paperwork to freeze cohabitation privileges pending separation. At 2 a.m., I made one last call. Layla, my attorney answered, groggy but alert, "Are we moving forward?" "Yes," I said. "Initiate the separation. I want all assets frozen before dawn." And pull his credit card privileges. By 3 a.m., Damon's life, the one he bragged about to Ivy, the one he thought he controlled, was no longer his. He just didn't know it yet. I shut my laptop and looked out into the dark horizon. The waves crashed like drums of victory. Somewhere down the resort hallway, Ivy probably thought she'd won. Damon probably believed I'd sulk and surrender, just like always. But I was done being the woman who carried the baggage. I was now the one who packed the consequences. The next morning, I woke up before the sun crested the ocean. The light was soft and gray, but inside me, everything was sharply focused. I brewed the complimentary coffee in the tiny resort machine, drank it in silence, and powered on my new phone, the one Damon didn't know existed. Within seconds, notifications poured in from Andrea, my lawyer. The asset freeze was confirmed. The joint accounts were locked. Damon wouldn't be able to withdraw a single dime. I walked out onto the balcony, barefoot, letting the breeze catch the hem of my robe. Below, the pool loungers were still empty. The world was quiet, and for the first time in a long while, so was my mind. At 8:12 a.m., I saw them. Damon and Ivy walked into the main lobby like royalty. He wore his favorite linen shirt, hair styled perfectly, trying so hard to look put together. But I noticed the tension in his stride. Ivy was already on her phone, tapping furiously with the same hand that had once tossed her purse at me like I was her assistant. They approached the front desk, and I watched from behind a rack of postcards and keychains at the nearby souvenir shop. "I'm sorry, sir," the receptionist said politely but firmly. "Your card has been declined." Damon blinked. "That's not possible." "Try again." She tried. Again. Red light. Declined. He handed her a second card. Ivy leaned in, visibly annoyed. "It's just a glitch," she muttered. But the second card failed too. Then a third. I could almost feel the temperature in the lobby shift. "I recommend contacting your bank," the receptionist said, her tone still cool. "It appears the account has been closed to all outgoing funds." A flicker of panic danced across Damon's face. Ivy turned to him, her mouth pressed into a tight line. "I told you we shouldn't have booked that damn ocean tour until after the weekend." He tried to brush her off. "Relax. I've got this." But he didn't. He never had. "Would you like to settle the bill with a different method?" the receptionist asked. "Ivy," Damon barked, already frustrated, "just use your card." She pulled a platinum Amex from her wallet and handed it over, rolling her eyes like this was beneath her. "Swipe." Declined. "Ma'am, I'm sorry," the receptionist said, softer this time. This card has insufficient funds for the current balance. How much are we even talking about? Ivy snapped. $24,360, the receptionist replied, unfazed. That includes room charges, spa packages, meals, and additional activities booked under your name. A long silence followed. Damon took a half step back. Ivy's mouth opened but nothing came out. Sir, if you're unable to settle your charges, we can temporarily store your luggage until proper payment is arranged, the receptionist added. A security guard stepped discreetly closer. Ivy was hissing something at Damon now, but I didn't care what. All I cared about was watching him squirm. Watching him realize, in public, that the empire he thought he built was never his. I left quietly before they noticed me. My smoothie in hand, sunglasses on, I strolled out into the open-air corridor, letting the Florida sun bathe me in quiet triumph. Later that evening, I returned to room 827, shut the door behind me, and opened my laptop again. I deactivated Damon's secondary credit card, the one I'd allowed him to use for client entertainment, which I now knew meant massages for Ivy and first-class upgrades to nowhere. I called the credit company and had the card permanently shut down. Would you like us to notify the secondary cardholder? The rep asked. No, I said. I'll handle that. Next, I moved on to our car insurance policy. Damon had been driving my BMW for months, calling it his car like he'd ever paid a single installment. I filed an immediate suspension of coverage. No insurance meant no legal driving. I watched the clock tick past midnight as the digital pieces of his life began falling away, one by one. By morning, it would all be gone. The next day, I received a short but powerful message from Andrea. Separation paperwork filed. Temporary court order on asset freeze approved. Will serve official notice within 72 hours. I stared at the message, read it twice, and then stood still in the middle of the room. The silence wasn't empty, it was earned. Then I remembered my kids. That's what mattered most. Not Damon. Not Ivy. Not revenge. It was them. And they needed to know I hadn't disappeared. So I wrote 3 letters. One for each of them. To Ellie, my youngest, I used purple stationery. Her favorite. Dear Sunshine. I know things feel strange right now. But I'm still here, just somewhere safer. Becoming a better mom for you. Remember the drawing you made in kindergarten? The one where you said I was the best mom in the galaxy? I kept it. It's with me now. You're still my galaxy, Ellie. Always. I folded the letter and placed her drawing inside, crayon lines shaky, but the love still loud and true. To Noah, my curious, brilliant middle child. My little thinker. You've always asked why more than anyone. So here's why. I didn't leave out of anger or fear. I left to keep the best parts of myself safe, for you. Remember the volcano project we built? You said I was the only one who really got you. That's still true. I got you. I always will. I added the little Lego robot I'd bought secretly last year. Damon called it junk. But Noah loved it. To Aiden, my firstborn, the one who saw everything but said nothing. I know you're angry. I know you don't know who to side with. But being our child doesn't mean picking sides. It means choosing what's right. You've always been brave, Aiden. Even when you didn't feel it. I saw it the night you stayed up with me during the storm. You told Ellie not to cry. But you were scared too. I remember. And I'm proud of you. I folded the letter around a small metal keychain that read, "Stay steady." I dropped them off at their school that afternoon, handing the envelopes to Ms. Thomas, the longtime librarian who'd known our family for years. They still talk about you, she said gently. I just want them to know I haven't vanished, I replied. And that love hasn't either. A few days later, my new phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mom. It's Noah. I miss you. Then another. Thanks. Aiden. And just like that, something shifted inside me. Not like a light switch. More like sunrise, quiet but unstoppable. They were finding their way back to me. And that meant everything. 3 days later, the skies opened up on Ellie's birthday. Rain poured like the heavens had broken a promise. I sat in my tiny St. Augustine apartment, turning the small purple-wrapped gift over in my hands. Inside was a beaded bracelet I had made by hand, using the same shiny pink and silver beads Ellie once chose at a summer fair. She'd begged me to make her a real princess bracelet, and I told her I would, just not that it would take me years and pain to deliver it. I didn't know if she'd ever wear it. Damon had made it clear through his lawyer that anything involving the kids had to go through official channels. For their protection, he claimed. I knew better. I hadn't seen them in person since walking out of the restaurant. No hugs, no goodnight kisses, no forehead brushes. Just letters and hope. And that hope was beginning to stretch thin. Until 4:12 p.m., when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and gasped. 3 soaked children stood on my doorstep, hair plastered to their foreheads, shoes caked in mud, clothes dripping with rain. But their eyes, those wide, weary, beautiful eyes, looked up at me with fierce, quiet longing. Ellie launched forward first, her arms wrapping tightly around my waist like she would never let go. I don't want to be there anymore, she whispered between sobs. They had a party without asking what I liked. They didn't even remember the kitten cake you promised last year. Ivy's friends came, not mine. I held her against me, letting her tears soak into my sweater. Noah stepped in next, shaking water from his backpack. We left after Ivy told Ellie to stop crying. Aiden said enough was enough. Aiden stood at the threshold, taller than I remembered. His jaw clenched, but his eyes shone with emotion. We walked here. 5 miles. Dad wasn't home. Ivy didn't even notice. Ellie said she wanted to see you. So we left. I blinked back tears. Are you sure? Aiden's voice cracked. If I hug you now, no one's going back. I pulled all 3 of them in. Shut the door behind them. The apartment that had once felt hollow now pulsed with life. Towels, dry clothes, leftover pizza, laughter so raw it hurt. That night, we weren't just a family. We were survivors. We sat cross-legged on the carpet, eating off paper plates, telling dumb jokes. Ellie bounced around, hugging the bracelet box like it was treasure. Noah played the birthday tune on his phone. Aiden poured the milk without being asked. At bedtime, as I folded blankets on the couch, Aiden called me over. Mom, he said softly, Ivy said you left because you were selfish. She said you ran away. I swallowed hard. But I read your letter, he continued. And I saw the bracelet you made for Ellie. I remember when I sprained my ankle and you stayed up all night with ice packs. Ivy never even asked what we wanted for dinner. He paused. You're not going back, right? I shook my head. No, sweetheart. I'm not. Good, he whispered. You're the only one who never disappeared. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen to find Ellie coloring on the floor, Noah reading with his feet tucked under the blanket, and Aiden setting out cereal bowls like he belonged there. That was the moment I realized this wasn't temporary. This was home. 2 months later, I received an email from Andrea. The subject line was blunt and beautiful. Eviction order approved, 7 days notice served. Damon Morrison would have to leave the Maple Creek Lane property, the house he used to strut through in expensive loafers and talk down to me in front of our kids. Legally, he held no claim. Emotionally? He had abandoned it long ago. I didn't show the kids the email. I didn't tell them the details. But that afternoon, while sunlight poured through our little apartment and Aiden helped build a new bookshelf from scratch, I looked at them, really looked, and realized the war was over. I had already won. From old neighbors and acquaintances, I later learned what happened. Damon screamed at the movers when the eviction notice was posted. He tried calling every lawyer he knew. Ivy had packed her things 3 days earlier without a word, no explanation, no apology. Just a single torn receipt with 2 words scribbled on the back, "I'm done." The BMW was towed away. Damon argued with the driver until his voice cracked. His company shut down soon after. 8 employees laid off. The office lease cancelled after months of unpaid rent. But none of it moved me. Not even when his old friend from college texted me, asking if I'd heard about Damon's fall from grace. He didn't fall. He jumped. Over and over. Into his own pride, his lies, his self-importance. I had simply stopped catching him. What he didn't expect was for me to stand tall once he hit the ground. 1 week after the eviction, I sat at my new desk in our tiny home office nook, reviewing contracts for freelance marketing work. That's when I decided it was time to give him what he was owed. Not vengeance. Not an insult. Just truth. I opened a fresh Word document. The header read, "What you never saw." 37 pages later, I was finished. The document included every expense I covered over 12 years. His part-time MBA, $42,800. Startup debt, $68,000. Home renovations, $12,000. Plus receipts. Plus dates. But the last page was the only one that really mattered. It wasn't about money. It read, "Damon, you always believed I was just the woman beside you. But everything you showed off, I built. Every contract, every investment, every financial cushion, I laid those bricks. And when you thought you were burning me to the ground, you forgot. I was the architect. And now I walk away, while you sit in the ruins of a house you never owned. I never sent it. I printed it. Folded it. Sealed it in a golden envelope labeled with my full name. Irma Annette Caldwell. I placed it in my nightstand drawer, next to my wedding ring and the necklace my mother gave me before she passed. Because Damon didn't need to read those words. He was already living every consequence printed on those pages. 3 months after the eviction, I signed a new lease for a modest ivory white house in the quiet suburbs of Jacksonville. It had 3 bedrooms, an attic Aiden instantly claimed as a reading and coding corner, and a small backyard where Ellie wanted to plant strawberries. Noah, as always, asked for a wall big enough for stars, so I promised him a galaxy map with glow-in-the-dark decals. The move-in day was unceremonious but beautiful. There were no moving trucks. Just me, my kids, a borrowed pickup truck from a neighbor, and boxes filled with truth. It wasn't the house that made it feel real, it was the way Ellie walked into the living room, took one deep breath, and spun in a full circle. "This house smells like you," she said. I laughed. "What does that smell like?" She tilted her head, very seriously. "Like cake, your hair, and peace." We painted the walls together that weekend. Ellie's room became a soft blend of pastel pink and lavender. Aiden chose sleek gray and added floating shelves for his books. Noah took over one wall entirely, where we built his dream galaxy. At night, when we turned off the lights, constellations glowed faintly overhead, like our own private universe. We didn't need chandeliers. We had stars. As for work, starting over wasn't terrifying. It was thrilling. Liberating. Back when Damon's name was plastered on our old business cards, I was the one behind the curtain, writing proposals, handling client calls, revising budgets late into the night. He shook hands and smiled wide. I made sure those smiles weren't funded with bankruptcy. So, I picked up the phone. I called every former client who still had my name saved. "Hi, it's Irma Caldwell. I used to work with you through Morrison and Caldwell. I'm on my own now. Some hung up politely. Some paused. But a few responded with words I didn't expect. I was hoping you'd break out on your own. Honestly, you were the one who made things happen. Your ex just talked loud. You were the real brain. Within 6 weeks, I had 7 steady clients and a waiting list. I hired my first assistant, Natalie, a brilliant communications student who used to work the register at the bookstore around the corner. She reminded me of myself. Quiet. Watchful. Fierce underneath. We turned the garage into a home office. Aiden helped install lights and soundproof panels. Noah painted a small logo mural that read, Caldwell Creative Solutions. Ellie brought down cookies during Zoom calls, and one client laughed so hard he offered to double my rate if I sent baked goods with every pitch deck. Don't ever close the office door, okay? Ellie once said. I like hearing you talk. You sound strong. I turned to her, surprised. You listen to my calls? Not the words, she said. Just the sound. It's different now. And I realized she was right. I didn't mumble. I didn't defer. I didn't lower my voice to soothe a man who needed to feel more important than me. I had unlearned shrinking. And my children saw it before I did. They changed too. Noah, who once walked with his head down in every grocery aisle, now casually looped his arm through mine. He asked questions about produce, about business, about life. Mom, how do you know when strawberries are ripe? Mom, why do companies pay for branding? Mom, how did you know when to leave? Aiden started journaling. I caught him once typing furiously, not hiding it, just focused. I didn't intrude. Later, I found an old notebook where he'd scribbled. Today my mom negotiated with French clients. She sounded firmer than my math teacher. And Ellie. My free-spirited, storm-eyed Ellie. At bedtime, she no longer needed lullabies. She needed answers. Mom, if Dad says sorry, would you go back? I looked at her for a long moment, brushing her curls off her forehead. No, sweetheart. I'll forgive him. But I'll never go back. Even if he cries? Yes, I said. Because forgiveness is for peace. Not for permission. She nodded slowly, eyes soft. I don't miss that place. This one feels like it hugs us. She curled into me. And I whispered something I'd never said out loud. You are the reason I left. You. Noah. Aiden. Because I wanted you to grow up in a home, not a stage. That winter, Jacksonville grew foggy and cool. We bought cheap sweaters and made hot chocolate in mismatched mugs. One morning, while Ellie giggled from the living room and Noah chased her with a blanket cape, an email from Andrea arrived. Just one line. He signed the divorce papers. No negotiations. I sat very still. Outside, Aiden was tightening the strap on his backpack. The cinnamon waffles were still warm on the stove. It was done. Legally. Irrevocably. I was free. Through mutual connections, I learned Damon now lived alone in a dim, ground-floor unit in an old apartment complex near the edge of Tampa. Sparse furniture. No working car. No new clients. Just a stained couch, a flickering lamp, and a bent-back chair he used to call his throne. He walked to the bus stop each morning, carrying the same old leather briefcase that once held glossy pitch decks. Now it carried unanswered job applications. Ivy? She had vanished long ago. She left right after the boutique fiasco, when her card was declined in front of everyone. One former staff member told me she didn't even pack all her things. Just slipped away without a sound. The final blow came a few weeks later. Aiden walked into my room and held up a phone. It was the old one Damon had given him out of guilt, not love. On the screen, one unread message. Can you tell your mom that I'm sorry? Aiden looked at me. I didn't answer. I nodded. You don't have to, I said. Then I took the phone. Deleted the message. Powered it off. In that moment, I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. We spent that night curled up on the couch with blankets and popcorn, watching old family movies I'd backed up on a drive Damon never knew about. One by one, the kids fell asleep against me. And for the first time since that day in the marble resort lobby, I allowed myself to cry. Not from pain. But from relief. I had survived. I had rebuilt. And most importantly, I had never disappeared. On the first day of spring, I signed the final paperwork. Not for divorce. That had already been done. This was bigger. I purchased the house. It was no mansion. No gated estate with columns and fountains like Damon once pretended we'd own. But it was mine. The title bore only one name, Irma Annette Caldwell. I walked through every room slowly that evening, barefoot on the hardwood floors, touching the walls with reverence. Ellie's drawings were taped on the fridge. Noah's galaxy wall now sparkled with newly added star stickers. Aiden's attic study had grown into a full-blown research lab, filled with scribbled whiteboards and a 3D model of the solar system. The house buzzed with life. The kind of life Damon never knew how to nurture. After dinner, while Noah and Aiden debated constellations and Ellie brushed her doll's hair, I returned to my desk and pulled out the envelope I had never mailed. What you never saw. I opened it. I reread every line of the 37 pages I'd written, every receipt, every timestamp, every humiliation turned into evidence. Then I placed one final page on top. It didn't contain numbers or records. Just a list of small, quiet things. Kept track of your mother's medication schedule for 3 years. Learned tax law in my spare time to save your failing company $12,000. Told the kids you were on business trips when you were with Ivy at resorts. Missed my promotion to stay home when Noah was sick. Put on lipstick and smiled at every client dinner even when you said I looked tired. And at the very bottom, written in ink and in peace. My silence was never surrender. It was the last boundary I had left to protect the part of me you could never touch. I folded the letter. Not for mailing. For memory. Because Damon didn't need to read it. He was already living every word. By summer, Caldwell Creative Solutions had grown. More clients, a new website, and enough revenue to hire a second assistant. I didn't chase success. It came because I did the work, quietly, diligently, the same way I'd done for Damon while he pretended he was the genius. This time, no one was pretending. One Thursday afternoon, Ellie came home from school carrying a library book and a puzzled look. Mom, she asked. Why do people say revenge is bad? I paused. Where did you hear that? Some girl at school said it's what angry people do. But, aren't you doing revenge? Her voice was honest. Unfiltered. And it hit harder than anything Damon ever said. I pulled her into my lap. Sweetheart, I'm not doing revenge. I'm doing survival. I'm building a life that's real. One where we don't have to pretend. But you made Dad really sad, right? I exhaled. I didn't make him sad. His choices did. She blinked. Then whispered, You're the strongest person I know. And that moment? That was the reward. Not Damon's downfall. Not Ivy's vanishing act. But this, my daughter, in my arms, saying I was strong because I stayed true. A month later, Aiden stood in the backyard beside me, watching Ellie attempt to garden strawberries while Noah helped build a small wooden bench near the fence. She's not gonna stop until she has a jungle, Aiden muttered. She's growing what she never had, I said softly. He turned to me. Like you. It wasn't a question. It was truth. That night, we sat outside wrapped in blankets, watching a meteor shower. I made cocoa, burned the marshmallows slightly, and no one cared. We pointed at falling stars and made wishes. Mine? That they never forget this feeling, peace without performance. The next morning, a letter came in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a short note from Damon. I know you won't write back. I know I don't deserve anything. But if the kids ever ask who I was, tell them I wasn't always this broken. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I folded it neatly, placed it in a folder labeled closed chapters, and slipped it into the drawer beneath old photo albums. He wasn't always broken. But he chose to stay that way. And I chose to heal. That weekend, I threw a party in our backyard. Not a big one, just a few neighbors, Natalie and her boyfriend, and the kids' closest school friends. We grilled, we danced to cheap speakers, and I baked Ellie's long-awaited kitten cake. She burst into happy tears when she saw it. It's perfect, she whispered. Even better than I imagined. And when the sun began to set, I sat on the bench Noah built and watched the laughter echo into the evening air. For the first time in years, I didn't think about Damon. I didn't think about Ivy. I didn't think about who I used to be. I just sat there. Still. Whole. Free. Autumn came gently that year. Jacksonville transformed with breezes that cooled the air but not the warmth in our home. The kids had settled into new schools. Ellie joined the art club. Noah discovered a love for debate. And Aiden, well, he'd grown into a version of himself that stunned me. Steady. Thoughtful. Protective. One Saturday morning, I found him in the kitchen making scrambled eggs. You're up early, I said, pulling my cardigan tighter against the morning chill. Thought I'd cook for once, he said. It's your client meeting day. I stood there, staring at my son, and remembered a time when he barely spoke, when he used to walk on eggshells around Damon, afraid his voice might start a fight. Now, he was taking care of me. After breakfast, I stepped into my home office, turned on the camera, and joined a video call with a potential client, a major nonprofit director in Atlanta. I've heard your name a lot lately, she said. And everyone says the same thing. She's the one who really ran the Morrison firm. I gave a small smile. That's generous. I just made sure the work got done. You're underselling yourself, she said. Which tells me I'm in the right hands. By the end of that call, I had signed the largest contract of my career. That night, I baked brownies. Real, gooey, walnut-laced brownies like I used to make before the stress of my marriage turned cooking into another chore. We ate around the dinner table and played a game Ellie invented called Best Part, Worst Part. Best part, said Noah, was when Mom didn't yell at me for dropping the juice pitcher. I didn't yell because Aiden caught it, I teased. Aiden smirked. Worst part was that Ellie's art project used up all the printer ink. Ellie shrugged. Best part? My art teacher said my sketch looked like a real story. And worst part? I accidentally drew Ivy in a trash can. Silence. Noah nearly spit his milk. Ellie, I said carefully, trying not to laugh, why would you draw her like that? She yelled at me once and said my laugh was annoying, she mumbled. So. I drew how I feel. Aiden muttered under his breath, fair. I didn't scold her. I didn't tell her to erase her feelings. I just looked her in the eyes and said, you're allowed to draw your truth. Just be ready to grow beyond it one day. She nodded, thoughtful beyond her years. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat by the window in my robe, sipping tea. I stared into the dark and thought about the woman I used to be. The woman who packed every suitcase for a family trip she wasn't wanted on. The woman who stood in a hotel lobby, her husband's mistress tossing her a purse like she was housekeeping. The woman who walked away quietly and never looked back. And then I thought of the woman I was now. That same night, my lawyer Andrea sent me a secure file, the final financial report following the divorce and asset liquidation. Damon had nothing left under his name. The Colorado vacation house was fully mine. The car? Long repossessed. His attempt to revive his business? Dead in under 6 months. He'd tried reaching out again, through his cousin, through his old college friend, even via a long-forgotten email chain. Each time, he used new words: I miss the kids. I want to see them. I've changed. But change isn't proven in apologies. It's shown in behavior. And Damon's behavior remained predictable. When silence didn't work, he tried pity. When pity didn't work, he tried guilt. But I had grown immune to those currencies. What broke me once now bounced off my armor. And the kids? They had stopped asking when they'd see him again. That was the clearest sign. Aiden once said, if he really wanted us, he wouldn't need permission. He'd just show up. Not with gifts. But with honesty. Noah said, I don't need him to say sorry. I need him to be better. And he's not. Ellie, in the quietest voice, had whispered, I like this version of us. It doesn't hurt. So I let the silence continue. One day, as I sat on the porch writing new proposals, a former Morrison and Caldwell client reached out through LinkedIn. She'd heard I was back in business. We always wondered why your husband couldn't answer a straight question, she wrote. Now we know it's because he never had the answers. You did. That simple message reminded me, I wasn't rebuilding a career. I was reclaiming my name. At the end of October, I took the kids to a nearby pumpkin patch. Ellie wore a floppy hat 3 sizes too big. Noah argued about which gourds were overrated. Aiden pretended to be unimpressed but quietly picked the biggest one to carve at home. We drank cider. We took pictures. We laughed. And on the hayride home, Ellie leaned against me and said, this is the best year ever. It wasn't lavish. It wasn't loud. But it was real. That night, as we carved jack-o'-lanterns and watched our little porch glow in orange and candlelight, I realized something I hadn't said out loud in a long time. I'm happy. And I meant it. Not because of the revenge. Not because Damon fell. But because I finally stood. New Year's Eve arrived with a chill in the air and a peace in my chest I hadn't felt in over a decade. We didn't throw a party. We didn't go out. We didn't need fireworks to mark our survival. Instead, we wrapped ourselves in blankets out back, sipping cocoa, the 4 of us huddled together under the stars. Ellie dozed off on my lap, her beloved teddy bear tucked under her chin. Aiden scrolled through old family photos he'd digitized for me. Noah was reciting fun facts about space while periodically poking Aiden just to get a rise out of him. And then Aiden looked over at me. His voice was quiet but unshakable. Mom, we're okay now, right? I didn't answer right away. I just smiled and pulled the blanket tighter around us. Because yes, we were more than okay. We were whole. Earlier that day, I'd done one last thing. One final symbolic act to close the loop. I pulled out the golden envelope I had once labeled what you never saw. The one filled with receipts, records, memories Damon never appreciated. I opened it one more time. Read every page like scripture. Then I lit a match. Watched the flame curl the corners. Watched the pages turn to ash. Not out of hatred. But because I didn't need them anymore. He didn't win. But I didn't lose either. I evolved. Later that night, just minutes before midnight, Aiden surprised me with something I'll never forget. He brought out a small wooden plaque he had carved in shop class. It read, "This house was built with silence, bravery, and love." I blinked, the lump in my throat too big to speak. Noah hung it on the front wall the next morning. Ellie traced the words with her finger, whispering them to herself like a poem. That's when I knew. My children weren't just surviving, they were healing. We all were. I hadn't given them a fairy tale. But I'd given them the truth. I'd shown them what it looked like to walk away from pain, even when staying would have been easier. I'd shown them that silence doesn't mean weakness. That dignity can roar without ever raising its voice. In the weeks that followed, I was asked to speak at a local women's networking event. The topic was rediscovering strength after setback. I almost said no. I wasn't a speaker. I wasn't glamorous. I was a woman with 3 kids, a rebuilt business, and scars she no longer needed to hide. But then I thought about Ellie. And I said yes. Standing at the podium, I didn't quote famous names. I didn't wear heels or recite statistics. I just told the story, my story. How I was once someone's backup plan. How I booked a family trip only to find out my husband invited his mistress. How I walked away and didn't look back. How I reclaimed my name, my children, my life. The room was silent. And then it erupted, in applause, in tears, in recognition. Afterward, a woman in her 50s hugged me and whispered, "You gave me permission to start over." I walked home that night under a canopy of stars, feeling lighter than I had in years. And as I stepped into my warm house, the scent of cinnamon and cocoa still lingering in the air, I realized something powerful. I didn't need revenge to win. I didn't need Damon to grovel. I didn't need anyone to validate what I'd endured. Because I had already done the impossible, I survived betrayal, and I did not become bitter. I became better. Irma's story is not just about betrayal, it's about what happens when a woman stops asking for space and starts taking it. When silence becomes power. When motherhood becomes armor. And when walking away becomes the first real step toward freedom. She never shouted. Never begged. Never exposed him to the world. She simply watched him fall, while she rose. If Irma's journey moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Who in your life needs to hear this story? Who needs to know they are not alone? And if you're not already, make sure to subscribe to Revenge Echoes, where stories like this remind us all. Sometimes the strongest revenge is simply living better.